Greetings everyone, TLP here, aka the Booger Picker. Why the Booger Picker, you might ask? Because more often than not, I get the booger picks as opposed to the clickety clicks. Okay, now that we got the introduction out of the way, this will be an entry for Jon Lock's 300 subscribers. First off, let me just say this. I am new to Lock Sport. You know, a handful of months I've been in this, so I don't know a lot. I don't know a lot of channels, but I'll say this. I'm going to give 3 shout-outs off the get-go. The first two to Jon Lock himself. First off, for having 300 subscribers, I've got 9. So, outstanding job. And I've watched quite a few of your videos, and they have been very helpful. One specifically, I come across on your channel. I thought that was an interesting concept to simply make a video about this, which leads me to my third shout out. But the video I'm speaking about by Jon Lock on his channel, which I will link, a link to the video I'm talking about. It's titled All About Lockpicking Belt Rankings System, which for those who are in the Reddit lockpicking subgroup, you know about this. But he made a video walking through, explaining all this, very detailed, very thorough. But in it, he mentions challenge locks, which is one of the requirements to graduate to the blue belt level, which is what I'm working on. And that was always my issue. Okay, a challenge lock. I see the modifications that can be done. I see what can be done. But my question was, how do you actually do it? Well, in his lock picking belt ranking video, he recommended DMAC. I guess is how you would say it. DMAC has an actual playlist on how to make security pins and how to make challenge locks. And he actually just walks through the process. It's not anything formal. It's very informal. He just simply does it and allows you to see what he's doing. And I have been watching that. And so shout out to DMAC. Shout out to Jon Lock for his 300 subscribers. And shout out to DMAC for making that playlist, which helped me so much. Okay, now, with all that said, the entry. We're supposed to talk about a tool that we find helpful or that we like. Well, first off, I don't know if you would consider this a tool or not. I will get to a tool, but I'm going to talk about this for a second. Somebody, I don't remember who it was. I probably should have looked it up, but it was a post from approximately 7 years ago in the lockpicking subreddit group. I did a Google search for lockpicking cases, and, you know, this post from 7 years ago came up, and the man mentioned this, and he shared a link to it where he purchased it on Amazon. And I went and looked, and one of the reviews actually had a lockpicker's photo, and basically what it was a photo of him showing how his lockpicks fit in it. And I thought, that's exactly what I want. I'm out here in my quote-unquote booger bunker, as I call it. I am the booger picker. But, you know, my shop, where I do most of this. But there are occasions where I will go inside to the house and, you know, watching TV or whatever like that, I'll have a lock or two in front of me, and I'll just take my picks. And this is an easy way to transport. It just rolls up. Obviously, it rolls up. You've seen me unroll it. It rolls up, and it's got a Velcro strap, which the strap's not quite long enough, but you can always use a bungee cord of some sort. You know, like your wife or your girlfriend, or even you if you have long hair. You know, bungee ponytail hair holder type thing to put on there and keep it secure, right? Okay, but this thing is actually marketed to hold metal punches, you know, and it's got this bungee strap across the top, and it's got the individual pockets, and there's 14 individual pockets, and you can fit pretty much everything you need in here. I've got a couple of followers. This is what I've done. I've got just a piece of aluminum tubing, which could be used as hollow, obviously. And I've got my rather thin, what are these, 0.15 one thousandths. You know, the very thin ones that are very thin and can be, so I put them down in a hollow tube and try to keep them protected. Handcuff key, cheap picks. My first set I got off of Amazon, you know, some Chinese-based company or whatever. And then, you know, my tension wrenches, the couple of good pricks, a gut wrench from Sparrows, and, you know, various pinning tweezers. But, and another follower on the end here. Here, let's get this back in here. Probably shouldn't have taken that out. It doesn't always want to go back in there very well. Okay. But, like I say, it's got the bungee strap, 14 individual pockets. You can fit pretty much all kind of stuff in here. And it's got the flap on the top, so when you roll it up, things don't tend to slide out. But, like I said, I don't know if you would consider this a tool or not. But, this is something that I use on a regular basis, and I just love this thing. Okay, so for anybody who's interested, I will put the Amazon link to this in the description below, which I've been doing for quite a few of the videos I've made, which I don't have very many. But, okay, now the next thing, this would probably not apply to many of you, of our brothers across the pond, the Euro lock sport community. This might not apply to you guys because these, you know, I'm sure, see, like I said, I'm new, so I don't know quite a lot about all this, and I don't own any Euro locks, never picked a Euro lock, so I don't know, but I know, you know, quote unquote, the standards in general for Euro locks is different than American locks, which is where I'm from. But these would apply to American locks. Probably not so much to Euro locks, but it doesn't matter. The size is not what we're talking about. We're going to talk about what it actually is. Now, I got this idea. I've made these myself, but I got the idea. I seen somebody talk about these, and then they shared, or they talked about it, and they said where you could get it from. Well, I'll share the link to where this can be purchased. You know, the actual thing can be purchased on Lockpicks.com sells them, and I want to say Covert Instrument has it also. But if I'm not mistaken, it's the bigger size. Now, like I said, I'm new, so I don't know the exact sizes, but I do know that, you know, your basic padlock, the core and a padlock, and the core, and like this is a quick set, just to, you know, the shell, I guess you'd call it, the shell of a quick set door lock. Now I know the core, the hole for the core is different sizes, right? Don't know exactly what the sizes are off the top of my head, but I know this one is bigger than this one. And when I originally made this, I made this one. And it's marketed on lockpicks.com as an easy loader. And theirs has like a little, here, let me zoom in just a little bit so you can see this just a little bit better. Maybe it'll help explain this a little bit better. But it's basically like this. Now, both ends, I'll explain it. It's got, on either end, it's got like a little spring-loaded ball bearing, which when you put it inside, now I know you're not going to be able to see down in here because of the lighting. Yeah, that's not going to help. But when you go to load it, here, let me see. Can I bring this light over here? Will this help a little bit? Maybe, maybe not. But we all know the Bible, where the holes are, right? In here. That little ball bearing, when you load it in there, that ball bearing will snap down in these holes, and it will hold the follower in place from front to rear, right? So you don't have to worry about keeping it steady, right? Now, being that I made this in my shop out of, you know, an appropriate size lag bolt, if you will, I cut the head off and I cut the threads off, and I ground it down and then, you know, put a file to it, shaped it, and took all the burrs off and polished it up or whatever. Now, considering I couldn't put the ball bearing in it, but I could do this. And this is the feature that I love so much. It makes it so much easier. Most of us have followers, and the groove is a right angle groove, right? Now, this, like I said, it's marketed and it's titled an easy loader. I just call this one an easy follower But you see, I put a V-shaped groove as opposed to that squared off thing, right? Now, if you don't understand, now I'll explain it. Basically, it's a V-shaped groove. Now, taking the driver pin and the spring out of the core or the shell, that's no problem. That's easy. But getting it back in there, that's the issue. Because with that squared off right angle groove, it doesn't line up with the hole very well. But with this V-shaped groove, as long as you can get it in there, you get it in there and you get it positioned right over that hole and you hold it in place, all you have to do is drop the spring there and it lines itself up and falls right into that hole. Now, the driver pin, it doesn't work as perfectly depending on if the spring is sticking up out of the hole or not. If the spring goes completely and is recessed all the way down in the hole in the Bible, it works great. You just lay your driver pin up there and you kind of get it, make sure it's lined up. Like I said, make sure it's lined up left to right and, you know, forward to back, and you just hold it in place and you just take your tweezers and you just kind of push it down in there. Now, like if the spring is sticking up out of the hole, it's the same thing. You just lay it up there and you take your tweezers and you push it down in there. You're not having to fight with lining it up and fight with pushing it down in the spring, pushing the spring in there and then moving it up to hold it in place. All you're doing is lining it up and laying it there and just pushing. I'm pushing that driver pin down and then sliding it up. It takes that one step out of it, and it makes it so much easier. Now, like I said, I've fashioned mine off of the one I see on this web page. The one they have on the web page, it's got the groove and the ball bearing on either side. Well, I simply did it on one side, and I'll explain why. I'm one of these that when I go to gut, I will put the follower in, and I'll gut the first 3 pins, and then I'll take another follower and stick in there and run it through the other end. Here, I'll show you, because I've made another one. I made one a little bit. This first one, if you see, it's not quite, it's got a little too much tolerance in it. But as long as you hold it down when you go to run it through, it's okay. Now, this one was, I come across this lag bolt, and it fits in there a lot better. It's less tolerance. But, like I said, what I was trying to say is I'll do the first 3 pins or the first rear pins, however, you know, I'll do 3 on one side, and then I'll take the other follower and I'll butt them up against each other, 2 flat ends up against each other, and I'll run it through there again. That way, when I'm trying to do all this, I'm not having to dig way back in the back of the core to get to them holes. Does that make sense? I'll do the ones that are closest to me, pop, 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 run that through, and take the other follower and butt it up against it and run it all the way through and flip the lock around and do the other 3 or the other 2, depending on whatever. They're on that side of the lock. Makes sense? That's the deal. And then when you actually go to, you know, put it all back together, you see how it works. But, yeah, that right there is one of my favorite tools, and this is something I seen where you could purchase one, and I was like, you know what, I could make something like that, and I did. I just come across some lag bolts that were, you know, relatively the correct size, and I fashioned them myself. Now, what I've done, you know, most people know this. You could take a piece of wood doweling, you know, find the right size and do it. I just happen to have some lag bolts that fit. Now, like I said, 2 different sizes. Padlock and, you know, your normal standard door lock, 2 different size cores. So on for the one for the door lock, I did the same thing. You know, a piece of wood doweling flat on one end, and I put the little V grooves in the top of them. And I made 2 of them. Why? Because I do them the same way. I butt them up each other and I run it all the way through the lock. That way, when you're pinning or repinning it, I should say, you're not having to fight with the little right angle groove. You can do 1, 2, 3, run it through, switch the lock around, and do 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, depending on how many pin stacks you have. Does that make sense? Okay, now, I've talked for long enough. Let's back this out, and let's leave it at that. Like I said, this Punch roll is what it's marketed as. Picks fit in this very well. And you see all the stuff I've got in here, right? I'll leave the link to this below, and to these, I'll leave the link to where they can be found, you know, the actual product itself. It's lockpicks.com, and I believe, if I'm correct, Covert Instruments. And if that's correct, I'll leave the link for that also in the description below. If anybody wants them or is interested or whatever. And I'll say this roll is fairly cheap. Fairly cheap. I'm not going to list any prices because they're constantly changing, but I got it at a very cheap price considering what it is and how useful it is. Oh yes, this is something that, you know, buy 2 of them in case one wears out. You know what I'm saying? But with that said, there you go. And again, Jon Lock, congratulations on 300 subscribers. I only wish I could get 10. But with that, I'll say this, like I always say, keep it safe, keep it legal, and good picking. Booger Picker out.